3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files.
It's good to be back.
Documents released, but documents remain sealed, names redacted, materials classified. Today we examine what's still hidden, what we don't know, and whether it will ever come out.
It's a big question, isn't it? It's the silence that hangs over this entire case, the parts that are still in the dark.
We are looking at the mechanics of secrecy today. We're going to look at the Department of Justice's recent document releases and their subsequent deletions.
Which is a story in itself.
It really is. We will discuss the specific legal arguments used to keep things like hearsay and even entire documents under seal, the redactions in Ghislaine Maxwell's transcripts, and the lingering mystery of that non-prosecution agreement that really started it all.
Right. We're going to try and understand the how and the why behind all that secrecy. What's the logic? What are they trying to protect?
Exactly. So let's start with the database that appeared and then just disappeared.
The Vanishing Act. A perfect place to start.
Exactly. I want to take you back to a moment that I think really defines the frustration so many people feel with this case. We're talking about the Courier database.
Okay.
Now, for those listening who might not be glued to, the minutiae of data archiving, this is a searchable database. It was compiled by the Courier newsroom. But the story isn't really about them. It's about where they got the files in the first place.
Right. And these weren't like leaked documents in the way we normally think of them. This wasn't some whistleblower.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
These were materials officially released by the United States Department of Justice, the DOJ,
The official source.
the official source. They began to release all these documents and multimedia connected to the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. It was supposed to be a moment of transparency.
This is what we've been asking for.
Exactly. But then something really strange happened.
They hit the delete button.
They hit delete. It's incredible.
Right.
The DOJ releases these files, and then with no real explanation, they just start removing them. Yeah. Just pulling them offline.
Which is, if you just stop and think about it, that is such a bizarre behavior for a government agency that's supposed to be about justice.
Right.
Usually when the government releases something, it's out there, it's on the record. But here we saw a retraction, a clawing back of information that was already made public.
It creates this immediate sense of distrust, doesn't it? It's like if I post something on social media and delete it 5 minutes later, everyone just assumes I posted something I shouldn't have. But this is the Department of Justice. The stakes are a little higher.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And in the context of government records, a delete isn't just a typo correction. It's an active decision. Someone or some group of people made a choice that the public should no longer have access to this material that was just moments before deemed public information.
It suggests a conflict maybe inside the agency itself. Like one hand is trying to be transparent and the other hand is just slamming the door shut.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's where the save comes in. Because, the internet might be forever, but only if someone is paying attention. The Courier newsroom, they retained everything.
They were paying attention.
They grabbed these files before they just vanished into the digital ether. They compiled them in this searchable database that we're looking at today. And what's so incredible is that this database includes items the DOJ specifically deleted.
Which, of course, raises the immediate question, why? Why release it in the first place, and then why delete it? What was in that specific set of documents that caused them to have second thoughts?
Well, we have some pretty strong clues. According to the source material that analyzes this database, among the items that were released and then deleted were documents connecting Epstein to former President Donald Trump.
And there it is. That is a radioactive connection. It doesn't matter what your politics are. The second you have the Department of Justice releasing and then retracting documents that link a sex trafficking investigation to a former president of the United States, you're in a minefield.
It feels like being gaslit. Here's the information. Whoops, never mind. You didn't see that.
It really does. And it speaks to the volatility of this information. We're not just talking about a criminal case anymore. We're talking about a political football. The deletion suggests that someone, somewhere, realized the immense implications of what was being put out there and decided it was better to try and stuff that genie back in the bottle.
But because of the Courier database, we can still see the bottle.
Yeah.
And we can see the genie.
Exactly. And we have to be very careful here to distinguish between what the documents say and what the deletion implies. The document, okay, they connect the two figures. That's a fact of the file. But this deletion, that's an action by the DOJ. And that action implies that the connection was deemed too sensitive or maybe legally complicated or just too politically hot for the public record at that specific time.
It implies there's a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're filtering that, you have to ask, what else are they filtering? It makes you look at all the other data sets completely differently.
And we really need to talk about the sheer scale of this. When we say documents, I don't want listeners to picture like a single manila folder. We're looking at a massive, massive volume of data. The source material references data sets, plural.
Data set 1 all the way through 12, to be specific.
12. That is an immense amount of information. 12 distinct sets of data. That suggests the investigation was so much more sprawling than the public narrative often allows for. We tend to focus on the island or the townhouse in New York, but 12 data sets. That implies a network.
It implies a system, right? You don't have 12 data sets for a lone wolf.
Absolutely not. You have 12 data sets for a corporation, or for an intelligence operation, or a global logistics network. Whatever it was that Epstein was running, the digital and paper footprint was enormous.
It reminds me of that concept we've heard discussed before, the idea of the lens.
Yes, the lens concept. This was brought up in some of the coverage, I believe, from the TrueAnon source. The idea is that Jeffrey Epstein isn't just a criminal, he's a lens. If you hold him up to the light and you look through him, you don't just see one bad man. You see the larger networks of power, of finance, of influence that all operate around him and, frankly, through him.
He's the microscope slide.
He's the perfect microscope slide. He is the specimen that allows us to see the infection in the broader system. I mean, think about it. Through Epstein, you see how the scientific community chases funding. Through Epstein, you see how politicians interact with major donors. Through Epstein, you see how the legal system can be bent for the wealthy and the powerful.
And when you look at the DOJ deleting files, you are literally seeing the system trying to smear that lens.
Yeah.
They're trying to fog it up so we can't see those connections clearly.
Because if the lens is too clear, if the resolution is too high, we might see things about our own institutions that we cannot unsee. And so the deletion is an attempt to lower the resolution, to make the picture just blurry again.
It's the frustration of released then deleted that really gets to me. It just fits our theme today so perfectly. What's still hidden? Because it's not just hidden because it was never found. It's hidden because it was found, it was briefly exposed, and then it was deliberately buried again.
It's active concealment. And that is a very different beast from simple confidentiality. Confidentiality is passive. We're keeping this private. Active concealment is a reaction. It's, we made a mistake letting you see this, and now we are taking it back.
Okay, so let's unpack the how. How do they do this? We've got the database, we've got these files. But inside the files themselves, there's a war being fought, a legal war.
Mm-hmm. The war over sealing.
Right. We're looking at the mechanics of sealing documents. And I want to get into the specific legal arguments because they are, well, they're clever. Diabolically clever, in a way.
Legal strategy is often about finding the most boring procedural way to hide the most exciting or explosive truth. If you can wrap a bombshell in enough procedural red tape, nobody will ever hear it go off.
That's a good way of putting it. One of the documents we reviewed, again, we're treating these as facts from the file, not speculation. It discusses the argument for sealing reports based on hearsay.
Hearsay. It's a standard legal concept. He said that she said. In a court of law, generally, you want direct testimony. You want to avoid rumors. But you have to look at how it's being weaponized in this case.
The document argues that because a report contains hearsay, the entire report should be sealed, not redacted. Sealed.
And that is the crucial distinction. So let's imagine a police report. A victim comes in and says, Ghislaine Maxwell told me to go into that room and wait for Jeffrey.
Okay.
Technically, the victim testifying about what Ghislaine said is hearsay if you're using it to prove the truth of what Ghislaine's statement was. But it's also the primary evidence of the grooming process. It's the crime in action.
So if I write a 10-page report on the investigation, and on page 3 I mention that conversation, the hearsay argument is being used to lock away all 10 pages.
Exactly. They're basically arguing that the presence of that single line of hearsay taints the entire document. They claim it makes the document unreliable or unfairly prejudicial to the defendant. So instead of just taking a black marker to that specific line, they argue the entire document must go into the vault.
It's a blanket. They're using a very specific legal technicality to throw a blanket over the entire narrative of the crime.
And it's so effective because hearsay sounds like a legitimate legal objection. It sounds like it's about fairness and due process. But in practice, in this case, it functions as a silencer. The conspiracy was verbal. The crimes were often directives and instructions. By classifying those directives as hearsay, you effectively classify the crime itself as a secret.
And this leads to this battle that we see throughout the files, this tension between broad versus specific sealing.
This is the constant tug of war. The defense and all the John Does who want to remain anonymous, they're always arguing for the broad seal. Seal the whole thing. Seal the entire motion.
And the counter-argument is what?
The counter-argument, and this usually comes from the media organizations trying to intervene or the victim's own lawyers, is that the court should be using a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. They argue for specific sealing. Redact the name. Redact the phone number, redact that one hearsay line, but release the rest of the document to the public.
But they're not doing that.
Not frequently, no. The files show a clear pattern where the broad seal is applied. It's easier for the court, perhaps. It's certainly safer for the people named in the documents, but it is disastrous for the public's right to know.
And this is where we see that phrase, the no compelling reason argument, come into play.
I saw that in the legal briefs. No compelling reason.
It sounds like a challenge, doesn't it?
It is a fundamental challenge to the secrecy. In the American judicial system, the default setting is supposed to be openness. The public owns the courts. So to seal document, you have to overcome that presumption of openness. You need a compelling reason.
Like national security or something like that.
Exactly, national security. Or a serious, credible threat to someone's life. Or protecting the identity of a minor. Those are compelling reasons.
And the argument being made in these files is that there isn't one anymore.
The argument being made is that for many, if not most, of these documents, any compelling reason that might have existed has expired. Epstein is dead. Maxwell has been convicted and sentenced. The minors are now adults who want their stories heard. The privacy of a billionaire's social calendar is not a compelling reason to hide evidence of a federal crime.
And yet, despite this powerful argument appearing right there in the files, so many of these documents remain locked away.
Because the definition of compelling is being stretched to its breaking point. The courts seem to be accepting embarrassment or reputational harm to powerful people as compelling reasons, which effectively prioritizes the comfort of the powerful over the public's search for truth.
There's another phrase that jumped out at me from the files. It's almost like a bureaucratic stamp. Other sealed.
Other sealed. It sounds so mundane, doesn't it?
It sounds like the most boring administrative label possible.
And that's the whole point. We found this specific administrative marking on requests in the files. It's a bureaucratic category. It doesn't say top secret. It doesn't say national security. It just says other. It's a catch-all bin.
A bin where you throw things you just don't want anyone to see, but you don't want to explain why.
It is the junk drawer of judicial secrecy. But instead of old batteries and rubber bands, this junk drawer contains evidence of an international sex trafficking ring. By categorizing it as other sealed, it avoids the scrutiny that would come with more specific, serious classification.
Right. If it said national security, people would immediately ask why. What's the national security interest here?
Precisely. If it said grand jury material, there are specific legal rules for eventually unsealing that. But other, it's vague. It's a gray hole. It allows a document to just sit there, unobserved, unclassified, and most importantly, unopened, potentially forever.
It's the banality of the secrecy.
It really is. It de-escalates the importance of the document on paper while simultaneously burying it 6 feet under.
But there's an even darker reason for some of this secrecy mentioned in the files.
Yeah.
It's not just about protecting reputations. It's about protecting physical evidence.
Yes. This is one of the more chilling things you can find when you dig into these documents. There is a specific legal concern raised on the record about evidence being destroyed, hidden, or moved.
Destroyed, hidden, or moved. Those 3 words together.
Think about what that implies. This isn't just a concern that a document might leak to the press and cause a scandal. This is a concern that if the mere existence of certain evidence becomes known, if a motion is filed publicly saying, we want the surveillance tapes from the safe in his Paris apartment, that the people involved will physically destroy that evidence before the authorities can ever get to it.
It suggests the authorities, or at least the legal teams fighting for the victims, knew they were up against people who would, scrub the crime scene clean.
It suggests a very high risk of what's called spoliation. They knew they weren't dealing with some street corner criminal. They were dealing with people who own industrial shredders, incinerators, and private jets.
If I know you're coming for my hard drives, and I have a plane.
The hard drives are in a volcano in Iceland by morning.
So the secrecy, in this specific context, was actually argued as a necessity to preserve the evidence. The logic was, we must keep this request secret so we can actually catch them with the goods.
But that's the double-edged sword. Once it's sealed to protect it from being destroyed, it often never sees the light of day again. It gets preserved, but it's preserved in the dark. The temporary seal to protect the investigation somehow becomes permanent.
Preserved in the dark. That's a haunting way to put it. And speaking of things that were preserved in the dark from the very beginning, we have to talk about the origin story of this entire cover-up. The non-prosecution agreement, the NPA.
The deal of the century, or, depending on your perspective, the miscarriage of justice of the century.
We've all heard about the NPA for years. It's the sweetheart deal that let Epstein basically walk free in Florida after his first investigation. But looking at these source files, the secrecy around that deal is even worse than I remembered.
It wasn't just a lenient deal, it was a secret deal from its inception. The files explicitly reveal that a copy of the NPA was filed under seal.
Under seal. So nobody outside the room could see what the terms were.
Nobody. And most importantly, the source material states in no uncertain terms that the deal was concealed from the victims.
That specific word, concealed, appears in the documents.
Explicitly. Concealed. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't that they forgot to mail a letter to the victim's attorneys. It was an active, deliberate concealment.
Just imagine being a victim in that situation.
Yeah.
You're waiting for justice. You are working with prosecutors. You have given your statement, relived your trauma. You are trusting the system to work. And unbeknownst to you, a deal has already been signed, sealed, and locked away that lets your abuser and all of his friends off the hook.
It is a betrayal of the highest order. It effectively nullifies the victim's existence in the legal process. You are no longer a participant in justice. You're just a problem to be managed and swept away.
And the consequences, as they're noted in the files, were that the matter was effectively closed before anyone even knew it had been opened.
Without notice. That's the key legal phrase.
Without notice.
In the legal world, notice is everything. If you don't have notice of a proceeding, you can't object. You can't appeal. You can't invoke your rights under the Crime Victims' Rights Act. By entering into this agreement without notice to the victims, the government effectively short-circuited the entire justice system. They disconnected the alarm so they could quietly open the vault.
And this connects directly to that concept of institutional accountability we talked about in the roadmap.
It absolutely does, because who is signing this deal? Who is agreeing to seal it? It's the government. The source material highlights Alexander Acosta.
Alexander Acosta. We see his name pop up in the entity tags of the source files from that era.
He was a key figure. At the time, he was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. Later, he became the Secretary of Labor. But at this crucial moment, he was the architect, or at the very least the signatory, of this secrecy. By sealing the NTA, the government didn't just hide Epstein's crimes. They hid the very mechanism they used to let him go.
They hid their own work, their own decision-making.
Correct. They hid the blueprint of the cover-up itself. If the public had seen that NPA in real time, if they saw that it granted this sweeping immunity to any and all potential co-conspirators, there would have been immediate, massive outrage. There would have been intervention. Sealing it was the only way they could make it stick.
So the mechanics of sealing aren't just about protecting someone's privacy. They are about institutional survival for the perpetrators, and in this case, for their enablers.
It is a survival mechanism. Secrecy is the immune system of corruption. It protects the infection from the cure, which is sunlight.
That brings us to Ghislaine Maxwell. If Epstein was the center of the web, she was the partner, the primary associate.
The accomplice, the recruiter, the manager.
She was arrested after a year in hiding. That's a direct quote from the broken Jeffrey Epstein source.
A year in hiding, which again, it just reinforces this central theme. Everyone involved in this operation knows that their safety lies in being hidden. She didn't try to go on TV and clear her name. She tried to disappear off the face of the earth.
And then after her arrest, we got the Maxwell files. The News and Why It Matters source talks about this massive document release. But I want to zero in on her deposition transcripts. We have the interview transcript, Maxwell, from the source. It's dated 2025 in the source record, but it's looking back at these crucial depositions.
And depositions are fascinating because they are raw. It's just question and answer under oath, under immense pressure. It is the closest we often get to the truth. And when you look at the index of these transcripts, the list of keywords and where they appear, it tells a story all by itself, even before you read the pages.
We did a little word search, didn't we?
We did. We looked for the words that really define this case.
The host and expert looked at the specific words in the index of her deposition, and the ones that stood out were closed, hidden, and hide.
Let's just look at the frequency for a moment.
Okay, so closed appears at 113.9, 180.1 chick. It pops up multiple times.
Closed. It implies doors shutting, accounts being finalized, access being denied. It's the language of exclusion and secrecy.
Then hidden. That appears at page 187, line 20.
Hidden.
And hide. That one appears at page 212, line 14.
Now, let's pause on that. Why do those specific words matter so much in a deposition transcript?
Tell me.
In a legal deposition, lawyers don't ask about the weather. Every question is strategic. They ask about facts. They ask about actions. When words like hide or hidden come up that frequently in an index, it indicates a very specific targeted line of questioning. The lawyers are attacking the issue of concealment. They're trying to prove the cover-up.
So when we see hide at page 212, line 14, they are almost certainly asking her a direct question like, what did you hide? Or where did you hide the flight logs?
Exactly. Or did Jeffrey Epstein instruct you to hide this money? The prevalence of these words suggests that the interrogation wasn't just about the abuse itself. It was about the cover-up. It was about the infrastructure of secrecy that was built to protect the operation.
It tells us that the plaintiff's lawyers, even back then, knew exactly what game was being played. They knew things were being hidden, and they were trying to force her, under oath, to admit it.
And notice, if she had simply said, I never hid anything once, the word might not appear that many times. The repetition suggests a struggle. It suggests a topic that was revisited again and again and again because they weren't getting a straight answer.
And then there are the names, the pals, as the media call them.
The associates, the famous friends.
The names that just float around all these files like ghosts. Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton.
These are the names that consistently appear in the context of the private island.
Going to the island.
Yes, and this is where the redaction frustration really hits the listener, and honestly, it hits us as analysts.
It's the black bars. It's always the black bars.
Wait, it's the black bars. We see the name Prince Andrew, we see the context island, but then just a big black rectangle.
We see the who and the where, but the what, the specific actions, the verbs, that's what lies behind those redactions or behind those sealed summaries.
And that is the gap. That is the chasm of information we're not allowed to cross. Knowing someone was there is significant, absolutely. It establishes opportunity. It completely destroys the I barely knew him defense that so many have tried to use.
Right.
But in a criminal investigation, you need the action. You need the what. And the what is so consistently being redacted or sealed away.
It just makes you wonder if the what was innocent, would it need to be redacted so heavily?
And that is the logical inference that the public draws. And it's a perfectly reasonable inference. If the action was ate lobster and then went snorkeling, is that a compelling reason to seal a federal court document for decades? I mean, is snorkeling a trade secret now?
Probably not.
Probably not. So the secrecy itself becomes a form of evidence. The silence speaks volumes. If you are hiding the verb in the sentence, it's usually because the verb is incriminating.
This brings us to the current state of things. The government's official stance. We have a report from Breaking Points that says, quote, Gov closes case on Epstein.
Case closed. It has such a finality to it. It sounds like a heavy door slamming shut.
It sounds like mission accomplished.
And it is often just as premature, isn't it?
Because there's this massive contradiction here. The government says the case is closed, but at the same time, we have the Violence Project and other investigators still actively studying the puzzle around Epstein's suicide.
The puzzle. They're still calling it a puzzle.
Yeah.
And this is a crucial insight that I want listeners to really grasp. A closed case, in legal terms, does not mean the information is now open to the public.
Wait, explain that. Because I would think if the case is closed, the file should be opened, the investigation is over, so there's no risk of compromising it anymore.
That is the logical assumption that any citizen would make. But in practice, closed often means sealed forever. When a case is officially closed by the government, it usually means the active work stops, the digging stops, the investigation is over, and the secrets that were gathered during that investigation are then cemented in place, they're archived, They aren't necessarily released. They are just stored in the dark.
So closed just means we stopped looking.
It means we stopped looking and we are locking the file cabinet on our way out. It doesn't mean we have solved it all and here's the full report for the world to see. It allows the DOJ to say, we aren't commenting on this anymore. It's a closed matter. It's a way to end the conversation.
And that just leaves this open mystery, the weird stuff.
The weird stuff, yeah.
The unbridled mind source touches on this. The rumors about what was really going on at the island, the transhumanism theories, the blackmail, the surveillance.
And we have to be very neutral here as reporters. We are reporting that these rumors exist. They are part of the public discourse around this case. But we also have to ask, why do they exist?
Because they're a vacuum.
Exactly. The rumors and conspiracy theories rush in to fill the information vacuum that the official secrecy creates. Because the documents are hidden, because the actions behind the famous names are redacted, the public imagination runs wild. If there were weird scientific experiments or surveillance operations or blackmail schemes, the documents would likely hold the truth one way or another. But without the documents, we're left with the weird stuff, rumors.
So the secrecy actually breeds the conspiracy theories.
It is the perfect petri dish for them. If they released all the files and it turned out to just be boringly sorted financial crimes and abuse, the weird rumors would die overnight. The fact that they hide it so fiercely is what fuels the fire.
And the suicide. The ultimate closed event in this story.
Right. The Roy Green Show source discusses the psychological view on the suicide. But even they call it a puzzle.
A puzzle implies missing pieces.
And what are the missing pieces? The prison logs from that night. The psychological evaluations from the days leading up to his death. The camera footage that mysteriously malfunctioned.
The things that are hidden.
Things that are hidden. The very nature of the files implies that the answers to the suicide, whether it was a genuine suicide, whether it was assisted, or whether it was simply allowed to happen through gross negligence, are in those sealed records. By keeping them sealed, the government maintains the mystery forever.
If those psychological evaluations were released, if we saw that he was, say, perfectly stable in making future plans the day before.
That would change the entire narrative. It would strongly suggest foul play.
Or conversely, if we saw he was spiraling and they took him off suicide watch anyway.
That would imply gross criminal negligence. Or, even worse, intent. A kind of let nature take its course attitude.
By hiding those evaluations in the logs, they prevent us from ever knowing which it was.
Negligence or intent, that is the core question around his death. And official secrecy covers both of those possibilities equally well.
So we're left with a closed case that is completely wide open in the minds of the public.
A closed case, an open mystery, a database that appears and disappears, and names that are revealed but whose actions are completely concealed.
It's a whole tapestry of secrecy.
A very carefully and deliberately woven one. It takes a lot of work to hide this much.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.